a break from YouTube for a while, and I was working with Crunchyroll at the time. I stopped working with Crunchyroll for a while. I was like, I need to just do the cookbook. Like, that's what I'm focusing on. And it really helped me. Yes, it was grueling. Yes, it was like 20-hour weekends and everything. But the vibe of working on a cookbook is just so different than the vibe of,
Right, because you mentioned you like the
yeah.
slower content, which a cookbook would fall under.
Yeah, previous to the cookbook, because I have this full-time job, like when I was doing video tutorials of like how to make the duck yakisoba from Food Wars or whatever,
Hmm.
almost every video that I filmed, it was me making it for the first time. Like I would write the
Yeah.
recipe and then just film myself making it. I did not have time to practice it. I totally home taught. I have not been to like a culinary school or anything. So, and I would get so frustrated because I would try so hard. I would plan so hard for everything to go smoothly. I would run through the processes in my head. I very like Hermione Granger. I would like practice, like you're gonna chop this and then you're gonna put it in the pan and this is the shot that you want. And like I would just like it's freaking me out just to talk about it. Like I tried so hard to make it perfect and it's never perfect because cooking
Hmm.
you just never, it never like goes the way you want it to when you want it to. And I would get so frustrated because I'd have to edit around it and it was just like really anxiety making for me, really hard. And like 100% put that on myself. Definitely chalked up to the fact that I just didn't have time. Like I just didn't have time
Yep.
to go the length that I wanted to go to make a good video.
Well, especially because you're in the rat race, right? You're
Yeah.
like, I got to get this done for next week. I
Yes.
got to get this done for next week, and
Yeah.
that's always in the back of your mind.
Exactly.
I remember having a similar experience when I was working full time and trying to do the food videos too, and it was something simple,
Mm.
like I was in a very small galley kitchen, similar to like yours was, but I had nowhere to like put a camera
Yeah.
or light, so I had a little GoPro that was right next to me, and I was making strawberry ice cream from Devil May Cry,
Mm.
right? And I had my light, which was a ring light, basically like kind of in the sink.
Mm.
And somehow it had like fallen over, hit the GoPro,
No.
and the GoPro had gone straight into 4 cups worth of ice cream base.
Oh.
And the ice cream base spilled everywhere, all over the floor.
Oh.
So what would have taken 30 minutes of a video recording to make
Yeah.
ice cream
Yeah.
took 2 hours to clean up,
Yeah.
because you're trying to clean up heavy cream
Yeah.
and all
No,
the cracks
that's
and everything that it
horrible.
goes
Yeah.
into. And I was like, I'm done. I hate
Yeah.
this. Right. Like, and I just kept going and remade it because maybe luckily or unluckily, I ran into a lot of like issues in professional
Mm.
kitchens where something happens and you just have to
Yeah.
react.
Yeah.
You don't like, you have to fix it right then and
Yeah.
there because there's a guest waiting or a customer waiting. Now, when I'm making content, I have the I'm going to say I have the
Mm.
privilege of doing, like, I messed something up. I just show the mistake and be like, well, that's
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'll make like a second
Yeah.
one. I'm like, whatever, let me just remake it real quick. I've done that a couple of
Yeah.
times, as long as it's not crazy.
Yeah.
If it's a baking thing, I try to make sure it's a perfect
Yeah.
recipe. If it's a recipe I've made in the past that I can utilize again,
Yeah.
that way it's not like, because baking is a very different
Yeah.
beast. But like yesterday when I was doing the I don't remember. I filmed so many videos this week. I was doing a Genshin Impact
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and I was making the bulgogi bacon yakisoba pan.
Yeah.
I've never made that, but I've made yakisoba
Mm.
and I've made yakisoba pan. So I'm like, okay, well, really the only thing I'm changing is I'm marinating some bacon and throwing it in
Yeah.
there. So it's less daunting when you think about things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
way. You're like, oh, it's
It's
just
okay.
yakisoba with
Yeah.
bacon. It's not that, right?
Yeah.
That's how I have to start thinking, and that's how I did my entire culinary
Mm.
career,
You
where
should break it
you
down.
start to think about, yeah, you break it down. You're like, okay, these flavors will always work with these flavors, but these won't work with
Mm.
these. And sometimes you try it and like it goes one way or the
Mm.
other, and then you react
Mhm.
and then you dial it
Yeah.
in. But again, in the professional environment, you had the privilege of testing recipes because that was your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, this soup sucks. How do we fix it? It needs to be on the menu a week and a half. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I have a week and a half. We'll fix it.
Yeah.
Content side, I do the same thing. Like, I never test my recipes.
Mm.
I've never tested a recipe, like, ever. And people are like, Paul, how often do you? I'm like, never.
Never.
Like, if I mess it up,
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because it also goes back to being more relatable.
Yeah.
Where,
Yeah.
like, I want people to see that, like, me as someone who has professional experience messes up,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal, you know. But in your
Which
case,
is
it was like
which
if you
is
messed up, you were screwed out of time.
I was screwed at a time, and I think that is also a big lesson that I have. It's taken me years to kind of like get this, and I was a little behind the times in that way. I think like what's really valued now, especially with like younger generations, just really like that honesty and that like
Hmm.
not pretending to be someone that you're not. And when I started content creation, the vibe was very much like you needed to be an
You had
expert
to be
in
perfect.
something and you had to be
Yep.
perfect. And
Yep.
so I really like clung to that, and even when things started changing, and I remember when I first was introduced to you and seeing some of your videos, I just remember being not of you specifically, but like kind of jealous in general of people who could just like own up to making a mistake and then like move on like it was no big deal. Like I was like I don't know. It was something that I really struggled to like come to terms with. Like, how do you just do that? And I have
Hmm.
since learned to like lighten up. I can be really, really hard on myself, like really hard on myself. And I have learned to kind of like take it easy, relax a little bit more. You don't have to be perfect all the time. You don't have to always do like X, Y, and Z to make a good video or whatever. And that has really, really helped. Um, but yeah, like learning to kind of like let go of that and to roll with the mistakes was difficult. And at the time, especially when I was doing some of that early content creation, I just had so much on the line. Like my time
Hmm.
was out. I would spend hundreds of dollars on ingredients, you know, of my own money. I wasn't making any money. This was just my
Yep.
teacher salary that I was using to fund this hobby. Um, and like it just, there was so many things that were on the line that it became really oppressive for me in a lot of ways. So
Hmm.
when I got this cookbook and started working on it, it really felt like an undoing of all of that. Like suddenly didn't have a camera. Like your story of like the camera falling into the ice cream base or whatever, that is something that you really have to learn to work around. Is like when I move in the kitchen, I feel like I'm at home. I'm in my space. I know where everything is. I can like
Hmm.
reach back and open a drawer and pull out this thing, and like it just feels like magic to me. But when you have a camera in the mix and you've got lights in the mix,
It's
it's
so different.
so different and it's not
So
fun.
different.
It's not fun in the same way,
No.
and it becomes very awkward, and you have to learn how to deal with that. And so making this cookbook, I didn't have any of that anymore. All I needed was
Right.
a nice final end picture. And I was
Yep.
like, "Oh, I can do that. Like I know
Yep.
how to stage a really nice picture and I know how to make food look good." Um
Yep.
and it's so much easier to just make a mess in your kitchen. You know, you pick out the very best looking item and take a picture of it. And I was like, I can do that. Like that's all I need to do.
Yeah.
And then I
And you
just have
like you're
to
not worried about like picking up all the dishes in
yeah.
between shots. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
and I just have to write about it as if it went totally perfectly. Like that's all I have to
Hmm.
do. It was such a relief. It was such a relief, and
I love that.
yeah, I'm really, and I think the cookbook was just made with so much more joy than anything else, and I'm very very glad that I did it because it really opened a new like path for me and a realization of like, oh, I don't have to do video content in the same way anymore. Like I can still do these things that I love, like cooking, and I can just do it in different forms
In different ways.
in ways that make sense to me. And like, yeah, it was a very good. I totally chalk this up to my editor at the time, Natasha Iglesias. She's amazing. She herself is recently was on the New York Times bestseller list. She's incredible. But yeah, when she like approached me with this project, it was like she really I think if she hadn't approached me, I probably would have stepped away from YouTube like permanently for
Yeah.
sometime in early 21. Like that plus COVID and everything, it just was really a hard time for me. So this cookbook really pulled me out of a lot of stuff that I was going through and gave me a new lease on life in a way.